All right, fam. Welcome back to another episode of the Strong Life Podcast. If you're new, welcome aboard. I have a repeat guest, a repeat offender, Brian Bott, Sports AdvantEdge out in Wisconsin. I think we did this podcast a year ago because I think I did
Yep.
it out of Panera Bread while my daughter was at tennis practice. And my friend Brian here is crushing it. Multiple sport performance facilities, just doing great. And it's always invigorating to just text message you, like
Yeah.
a couple of words from Brian Bott. I'm like, I want to kill it now. You remind me of my buddy Joe Riggio. I can't remember if I introduced you guys. He's with Varsity House Gym. Did I
Okay.
introduce you guys yet or
I
no?
think we I think we've talked about him a little bit. Yeah. We haven't got a chance to yet. I'd
Yeah,
love to meet him though.
I got to do an intro with you guys because you're both very like you're always like moving on, like crushing the next thing. So it's inspiring just to think about you. So I know you just opened up another new facility, which makes how many total facilities plus you have partnerships inside of high schools?
So actual gyms, four. So
Four
this is our
gyms.
fourth one that we've opened in Oconomowoc. We've got Verona, Beaver Dam, Wanakee, and Oconomowoc. Technically, if you look at like a training facility, I would consider our Edgewood High School facility one because we run youth programs out of there. So we run all the high school programs, but we also have a youth program. Edgewood's a private school, um, so we're able to run youth programs there and really kind of develop the long-term athletic program there, right? Because it's
That's
not just
amazing.
high school now. Um, and then we consult with about five or six other high schools in the state, and we're working on three more right now, actually. So we're really excited about that.
I'm just taking notes as I always do so I could put it in the show notes. So at that private school, Brian, the youth
Yeah.
program, is that school a K to 12? Is that why you have youth?
No, no. So they're high school, 9 to 12. But with it being a private school, there's quite a few private schools around the area that feed into Edgewood, and so we have a really great partnership with them, with two full-time strength coaches at that high school. So you're talking about really a high-level Division III atmosphere, college atmosphere for those high school athletes. And then we have probably 30 to 40 seventh and eighth graders from various schools that hopefully will be attending Edgewood.
Mhm.
So it's another great way to show that their commitment to athletics as well as their academics, which is obviously a high priority there. um, they've really made a huge commitment to it, so kudos to them through what they've done, fundraising and what we do from fundraising to help them to really make that work.
Yeah, it's super impressive. I love watching your videos. I said this in the first one, but I'll reiterate or repeat it because we could have new listeners, but the technique is excellent. I see athletes moving athletically, which if somebody asks me, "Hey Zach, what's your program about?" I always say overall athleticism.
Correct.
Um, so Friday I watched our like JV wrestlers compete, and they were doing things that showed like they lacked body and kinesthetic awareness. And it was a reminder to me that the training has to get we have to implement what was lost with kids playing multiple sports and playing in the streets. So talk to me about like the youth program because I see the high school kids doing banded box squats, jumping, floor pressing. What is like the difference when you're training youth? Do they touch barbells or how does
Oh
it
yeah.
work? Okay.
So I think that's the unique thing, Zach. Right? I think everybody's pretty familiar that we use the conjugate method, and that allows us to find the correct exercises for the athletes for where they're at. I've said this many times to families when they come in to do evaluations at our gyms. Sometimes our seventh and eighth graders are better lifters than our sophomores and juniors,
Because
right?
of their
Because the
experience.
technique is so good, their experience, they've been around it a little bit longer. They haven't been exposed to really poor training
Yes.
where they've been allowed to bounce off the box, to not squat to death, to bounce a bar off the ground if they're floor pressing, bounce it off, so a lot of times I think it's really important to get those middle school kids before they go anywhere else so you can teach them the methodology you want. Obviously, we start our kids with like a goblet squat to a box and a dumbbell bench. If you're talking about the main movement or like a
Yep.
sumo deadlift with a kettlebell. But we don't hold them back. Once they can do them, they do dynamic effort work. They start without the bands. But once they can handle, some weight and they have the kinesthetic awareness to handle the instability of the bands, we have them do dumbbell banded bench. We have them do, a goblet squat standing on a band with it around their neck.
Oh, okay.
Really get the idea of what it feels like to try and move something with high intent. And I think that's, to me, that's the magic little pill that you get with the conjugate method is you're teaching intent on the barbell.
Yeah.
Because no matter how heavy the bar is, you still have to try and move it fast.
The speed, the compensatory acceleration training. And I think that's like, to me, is one of the big fallacies is sport coaches will say, oh, Zach does strength work. You guys could go to John Smith and do speed and agility. And I say, yo, everything we're doing in the weight room, not everything, but we train speed in the weight room. We will do dynamic effort, lighter weights with aggression and speed. And so it's interesting that the sport coaches, I don't expect them to know what we're doing, but it's also a little tricky. Like, do you ever have a sport coach who confuses the kids with that kind of, I don't know if they're saying stuff that's incorrect?
Yeah, I think, the whole speed and agility stuff has gotten to be like a standoffish community. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like you can't train speed in the weight room, and I call bullshit on that. You can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, if you look at what the equation is for power, is basically in layman's terms, weight times speed equals explosive power, right? So if I can move a weight fast, there's my explosiveness. If I can take a heavier weight and move it at the same speed, now I've gotten more explosive. If I can take the same weight and move it faster, so you change the variables. We talk, strength and conditioning is math and science. And a lot of times people forget that math plays an integral role in what we do. And so when you start talking about those submaximal loads, moving at a high velocity, you're in my opinion, you're training speed, and explosive power, and you're also developing attributes to help with max effort training.
Yeah, it's man, you hit the nail on the head saying that it's like a standoffish community. The best coaches just want to come together and learn. I think you spoke at some NHS SCA clinics, right?
Yes,
Are you on the are you an advisory?
I'm not. It's my buddy D Manchi, who I do my Get Your Edge
Yes,
podcast with, is on the Wisconsin Advisory Board. And I love speaking
I
at
know.
those things because it's like I think that so many times people hear, conjugate or various forms of training, and they think, okay, this guy's a weight room guy, okay, or they think of this and he's a speed guy. But why can't you be a performance guy?
Yes.
Right? It all goes together, right? Zach, we talk about that when we talk. Is like you can still, feed the cats, so to speak, and load the dogs. You know what I mean? You can do both. And those people out there telling you that you can't are probably trying to sell you something. And so, you know, real talk is what it is. We just sell performance results. And so we do both. You know.
Listen, I explained to the lacrosse team today. I said, no, there's no such thing as weak and fast or weak and successful. I said,
No.
maybe a fast lacrosse player is not jacked, but I'm like, I bet you he could do a lot of pull-ups, a lot of push-ups. If we taught him how to deadlift, he could deadlift heavy. And so I saw somebody, actually, I know it was my buddy Pete Arroyo in his book. He's in the Chicago area. In his book, it says like, how do you know when like heavy lifting doesn't transfer to strength? He said when the 1 rep max ceases to increase the speed, which I was like, oh, that's a great. I never looked at like what's a great way to measure Because that's a question. How do you know when you're too strong? We've been hearing that a lot. He's too strong. How do we know we're too strong? When your 1 rep max on the squat, deadlift, or bench doesn't increase your, I mean, there's a lot of things we could measure. You measure a couple things with speed. It's not always a 40. You do flying 10s, flying 20s, right? What do you
Yeah, we
test,
do we do
Brian?
we do we do accelerations. We do 10-yard starts. We do 20-yard starts, flying tens. We do it with anywhere from a 5 to a 30-yard build. You know what I mean? Obviously, the longer the build, hopefully, the faster your fly is. But to your point, there's that adage out there that if you squat 2.7 times your body weight, you're not getting any more, adaptation from a speed standpoint. And I would say, show me the high school kid that can do that. You know what I mean? I mean, that is such a, to me, that is such an outlier. I look back when I was at Wisconsin and we maybe had 5 or 6 guys that could do that. I mean, when you start talking about these guys, I mean, when you start to look at a 150-pound kid, I mean, he's squatting well over 400 pounds to get that 2.7. I mean, that's a lot of weight for a 150-pound kid to squat. Once you start getting into the 200-pound kids, now you're talking about kids that are squatting 550 or above,
It's crazy.
and that's a parallel squat, not a quarter squat now. And so, I don't want to fight the argument that
Right.
2.7 is the number. I just want you to show me the kids that can do that, because until a kid can do that, I'm going to keep pushing him in the weight room to get stronger, because I know that strength is going to be applicable to when he runs, when he changes direction, allows him to absorb force better. And so I think high school coaches have to get out of that mindset of missing the actual fact of the 2.7 or whatever you want to say, and hearing you're too strong. I think you're hearing the wrong thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And Brian, stay near your mic so we pick up on your voice.
Gotcha.
Also, it's context specific that a lot of people don't think about. And listen, I thought of it today. We had a lower body day at my high school, and I've got a sophomore. He's 150 pounds. He gained 20 pounds this year, and he looks great. And he's not a tall kid. He squatted 225 for 4 today, and he looks like he could have done it for 6. Now, somebody who's maybe smaller in stature might need to lift a little heavier or do more volume bodybuilding work to protect him if he's put into the lineup. So it's so hard when coaches make blanket statements of do this times your body, this amount of weight relative to your own body weight. What about, the size of the kid and whatnot? And so I think there's a lot of context that's important in those things. And also sometimes you have kids that are, they get very confident. They feel just more confident when they're stronger. Then you have other kids who feel more confident when they do the dynamic work. So I think a great coach like you're able to look at those nuances. And, speaking of kind of coaches who don't know stuff, I did a solo podcast regarding the Texas football coach who did the push-ups. So I know, looking at your athletes, if you wanted to do 300 push-ups in an hour, you could. You would do,
Right.
8 push-ups on the minute followed by something else for an hour. It wouldn't be
Right.
that hard. So I like, that's what I'm saying is it's great to see that schools are hiring you to go in as well as consult with you, because I don't know if you're only consulting in Wisconsin, but it's interesting that sometimes it's very hard to connect with a sport coach that might even be outdated. It's like they don't want help. So I'd love to hear about how the relationship begins when a coach wants to consult with you, because that's very admirable that they're saying, we need help. You're an expert. That's your expertise. Help us get better. It makes me really happy.
I think, and we're very fortunate in Wisconsin because we have, a lot of coaches that are very driven to get better at the things that maybe they don't have a lot of knowledge on. And so that is where usually our consulting conversations start, Zach, is, they have willing bodies and willing people that want to see their kids have success. And that is what coaching is all about to begin with. But we know at the high school level, a lot of times if they're weight room guys, they're not getting paid a lot, and so if they don't feel like they have a strong purpose, or they don't have a great understanding of what's going on in the weight room, they might not put a lot of energy in it because they don't have the knowledge and they're not getting paid. Well, where we come in with the consulting part is we give them that knowledge. And we'll have, coaches will reach out to us on the regular, about, hey, tell us about the conjugate method. Tell us about what you do at Sports Advantage. Well, and then I start to share what we do. And then I share, hey, this is our consulting program. This is how this works. You have me on speed dial for any question you need. We develop all your systems for your school. You are running Sports Advantage at your school with your kids. The best part about it, Zach, is everyone is individualized. So, Bayport is different than Mauston, which is different than De Pere, which is different than Sun Prairie, because every kid is different. Every weight room is different. Every utilization of, things that they have is different. It takes a lot of work on our end, but at the end of the day, my job is to provide an opportunity for these coaches to provide for their kids. And so if I give them a cookie cutter program, hey, in February, everybody on Monday is doing this. That's garbage. You know what I mean? That's not right, for us to do. And so, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of communication with our coaches,
Right.
and like-minded coaches that really want to see their kids get better. And so that's how our consulting usually starts.
How do you like for changing? So I understand the equipment is different. Like at your at the private school, I see the equipment like the West Side Bar, the Dynamic Fitness. What's the
Yeah.
not the glute ham developer? What's
The
that?
inverse curl.
I
Inverse
mean,
curl.
yeah,
Oh,
you've got machines that are
awesome. Yeah.
several $1,000s, whereas at my school, it's like, hey, dumbbells are breaking. They're like, well,
Yes.
we're out of money. So, how are you working with schools that are like very budget oriented? And how do you teach them to identify how to individualize the program? So, for example, today, when I'm going over training at my high school, I gave them option to back squat or front squat, but you don't get to go to the barbell until you could do 75 pounds for 3 sets of 10. I used to say 75 pounds for 10 reps, but I
Right.
found that they didn't have like the durability they needed to do. So now instead of just do it for 10, it's you got to do it for 3 sets of 10. So how do
Nice.
you teach them that, how to assess and individualize?
So I think, the first part of your question was equipment, right?
Yes.
So we actually just touched on this on our podcast was, running our systems on a budget.
Hmm.
And so to me, the first thing we try and educate them on is if you can only buy one or two things, what are you getting? Okay. And to me, it's always bands and reverse hypers
Really?
because you can do a lot with the bands. You can change exercise variations. I mean, you can do anything from like a banded good morning, banded leg curls, banded rows. You can do so many things with those bands, that it makes, and then it also allows you, if you have a small weight room, to still get a lot of kids in because the
Yes.
bands are very, cheap, and they can take wear and tear. And then if you can get some reverse hypers, if you can't get the reverse hypers, we use the like the Nordic boards. You know what I mean? Like an inverse curl, but it's just the Nordic, the eccentric Nordics. We ban those so they come back up just like the machine. So instead of having a $3,000 machine that you can load and that gets you back up, we just put them with the bands and they lower down the bands, assist them back up, and they come out of it. Um, when you talk about assessments, we try and at least have a presence when we begin. We do at each school. We've done a coaches seminar, and I'll give our schools up in Green Bay a lot of credit. the coaches seminar that I did at both Bayport High School and De Pere was attended by all sport coaches.
And
So
it was like a very I remember you telling me
uh,
about it. Is it more than one
awesome.
day?
The ones were just one day, but we're talking about, we go through the whole system, the whys of why we do it. We do the education. We shoot videos of different exercises, so the coaches know what what the exercise is supposed to look like. They have all that, um, and like I said, and then we educate the sport coaches, because the one thing that we found is, I want to be the one taking the bullets for the coaches. So, for a sport coach to stand up in front of another sport coach and say, this is the methodology we're using, they're going to get a lot of questions. When I stand up there, fire away, go ahead, try and, I'm going to give you the science, I'm going to give you the results, and I'm going to show you why, I have a 98-pound, female who just qualified for the U.S. Olympic trials in the half marathon using the conjugate method, which
Nice.
is like complete opposite of what everybody thinks,
High
right?
school
Should be
kid or
just,
college
yeah.
kid? High school.
No, she's out of college now.
Oh, out of college.
She was one of my first clients, Amy Davis. Yeah, she's 98 pounds, uses the conjugate method, and just qualified for the Olympic trials.
If people followed Westside for a while, when Louis was started working with CrossFit, they started talking about the implementation of the conjugate method for distance runners. And I don't know if you remember Brian McKenzie or CrossFit Endurance. He would do conjugate method to help people do the marathon, or is the ultra the double marathon. And it,
The ultra is the extra long one.
oh, it's
Yeah,
the
I do.
100
Yeah,
miles. So
yeah.
he was utilizing conjugate method for people to do those extreme long distances. Like when you do a coaches seminar, Brian, I've seen like photos and Instagram posts, you're in like a room. Do you take
Yep.
them in the weight room and put them through a workout?
We don't take them through a workout, but we go to the weight room. We go through the, how to box squat, how to bench press. I mean, we know this, Zach, but most high school coaches, okay, go ahead and bench press, right? Just land them, most kids
Right.
land the bar,
A lot
they
of
take the
details
bar
they're
out, and
missing.
it flops around. Yeah. We show them that, hey, bench pressing is a total body exercise, just like
Yes.
squatting. We go through the basic movements, progressions. We show them templates, how to build, a workout. If there's an injured kid, where's the substitution exercises.
Nice.
So we get ultra thorough with it, because at the end of the day, and whether this is selfish or not, this logo means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to put our brand with your school, it's got to be done at the standard that I want it done, and that my staff, does in our gyms.
And it's a 1 year program, or how does it work?
1 to 3 years. Most of our schools have committed to 3 years.
I love
Yeah,
it.
so
I
which it
mean,
should be.
it should be. Matt Wenning has said this quite often in his videos, is that in America, we're so into the 30 days to this, 6 weeks to that. He said, in actuality, we need to be looking at things in a 3 to 5 year template. And so at the high school, so now I have seniors who I started with as freshmen and went through COVID with them. So I didn't see them for a lot, but you could see the kids who stuck with the program. They're just completely transformed, not just physically, but emotionally. So I always use that example when we close out. Let's say I'm with the baseball team. I'm like, hey, look at Danny. When Danny got here, he was about 112 pounds. Now he's 160 something. I think you mentioned playing against Montclair. He's going to play baseball at Montclair. And he's such like an example of the kid who stuck to it consistently. And I love that you're not afraid to say our program has a 3 year option, which is
Yeah.
really what it should be. This stuff takes time. And I don't know why I'm more mature with that level of thinking. I used to not think like that, but maybe my exposure to smarter guys like yourself and Matt Wenning makes me think a lot more with long-term effects. What about, injuries, Brian, with kids who, do you have members at Sports Advantage, all the different locations, who, let's say they do sign up for the year, but they're inconsistent, perhaps by choice, or perhaps that their sport coach, let's say their basketball or wrestling coach right now, is implementing their own strength and conditioning. And so the mom is like, Brian, we can't get Jimmy there. They do lifting at school. Da, da, da. He's exhausted. Do you encounter that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we encounter all different phases of that, right? Even the middle school kids nowadays are having stuff at their middle schools. And so, it takes a high level of communication, both with the athlete and the parents. And sometimes it actually takes a communication with the sport coach to just really understand, the level of intensity that they're putting these kids through, and things like that. Because at the end of the day, um, you want to still have some management on their workload. Now, I believe that most high school kids are underworked and that they can handle more. So we're a little aggressive with the kids, because a lot of times, if you don't ask, they're going to do the work, but at the same time, we have an understanding, especially with like our club sports kids, because a lot of the club sports, are practicing late at night, because they get gym time. We have kids that practice till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then they come in and lift at 6 in the morning. So then it's like becomes on the fly. Hey, maybe we're not going to do our jump sequence today because that's too much volume for you. So,
Right. You were at volleyball jumping last night for 2 hours.
yeah, communication is really important when it comes to that.
It's I forgot that you do 6 a.m.s for athletes.
5:30.
What time?
5:30.
And also the other thing I remember is that when we did our first podcast, I remember you saying kids are capable of more, handling more work, but I'm sure if they're training with you, they're dialed in with nutrition. Today I had a high school athlete who he trains with wrestling. He didn't train at all in the preseason or the off season. And so he's evidently paying the price for that. But now he's training at lunch. So I see him today and I say, did you eat breakfast? No, I woke up late. Well, listen, you're eating lunch. You skip breakfast. You're going to have wrestling practice. You're not going to have your lunch in high school is 10:30 a.m. You're not going to eat dinner till 6. You're going 8 hours until your next meal. And I said, that's why you're not going to put on muscle. I go, you're missing breakfast. So I said, listen, you already ate lunch. Finish this next set. Go back and buy another sandwich and get chocolate milk. So
Yeah.
I sent him back. So I feel like I could kind of see the skin tone and the muscle tone of a athlete not following through on nutrition. So I'm assuming how do your 5:30 a.m. kids handle breakfast? Because they gotta go home, shower, I don't know. How's it going with running to
Yeah, I
school,
mean,
training?
a lot of our kids, that's one of the first things we ask them when they walk in the door at that time. Hey, do you have anything to eat? Did you have, we try and get them to get 20 ounces of water before they come in,
I
because at the end of the day, right? I mean, most kids hopefully
I
are
do
getting,
2 of these. I wake up and
yep,
I have a glass of this. I don't know, this is like 18 ounce.
yeah,
And then I start making the dogs their breakfast. And then I have another one. The importance of that to hit home for people listening. Yesterday was Martin Luther King Day. School was closed. I went in to train the wrestling team, and I had a few kids train with me, the kids that have not been pushing like they need to. And one of the kids on the third set of squats, after one rep, his like groin cramped up. And I said,
yeah,
you don't have to tell me. You drank nothing this morning. You ate nothing this morning. And your physique shows it. I really like ripped his throat out because
yeah.
it's like after saying it to a kid for 2.5 years, they need to follow through. What do you want a kid to eat for a 5:30 a.m. training session or drink?
To me, it's whatever they can handle.
Right.
That's not Skittles type of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if they can handle an apple, if they can handle, some toast, peanut butter, something, if they can have like some almonds or some peanuts or something, just to get something in their system.
Yeah.
But when they leave, every kid is told, hey, go home and get a good breakfast. Every kid, that's mandatory with our staff, is that if they're training in the morning, you're reminding them to get a good breakfast, and make sure that they hydrate. And so that's something we're constantly plugging. And we get messages from parents a lot, you know. Sometimes the kids even start grocery shopping with their parents, which is
Nice.
awesome, you know. And so sometimes our kids have an effect on the parents' health. You
Oh
know, they're like,
yeah.
hey, hey, we
Powerful.
don't want to be eating that, you know. So
What do you shorten the morning workout?
do
Just so it's an hour?
hour 15.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Were you
So
ever 1 hour like in your early days of Sports Advantage? And then you're like, we got to do that extra 15. Did you ever?
no, everything has always kind of been that 75 to 80 minute, because we encompass everything. So we have their speed work, as far as like they're on the turf, you know, whether it's linear or change of direction, um, and encompass with the weight room stuff. So,
Yep.
and we train like sharks. So really, I program for our trainers, program an hour and a half's worth of work, and we try and get them through in 75 minutes. So we don't have to do the high volume of conditioning, excuse me.
Yes. Yes. What I forget what software are you guys using for programming, or I think you were doing Excel cards.
We do Excel, and then we track everything in Google,
That's
Google
right.
Sheets. Yep. Yep.
I'll be interested to see if you ever implement like some sort of a software. Like at my gym, I use Wodify, and when I
Okay.
had multiple gyms, I used it because it managed billing and attendance
Yep.
and liability forms. Do you have a software that does
We
that
use we
stuff?
use MindBody, which
That's right.
handles scheduling,
Yes.
payments. We do all I do all the liability forms personally to make sure that the parents get them and sign them. So, or our directors do. I'm sorry, but if someone
Nice.
signs up for an eval, they automatically get the waiver to bring in,
Right.
liability form.
You mentioned like telling your staff at the end of a training session, if it's in the morning, they have to tell the kids to eat.
Yeah.
I know Mike Boyle used to record a weekly staff meeting slash training. I think it was I don't know if it was an hour or something, but what's your staff development, staff training look like?
So that's interesting you asked, because I'm transitioning one of our staff into more of that role, as far as our development, director. So
Gotcha.
we have different levels in our facilities, right? We have our directors, we have our full-time assistants, and then we have our interns. Okay. And so each week, the interns will have a weekly, whether it's Zoom or live session with our director of development. And it could be anything from, program design template, how to do the warm up, how to do how to on everything with the interns. Okay.
How long's
Then
an
we get
internship?
what's that?
How long does an internship last? Or is it through to college only?
It's usually through the college. Usually it's 480 hours. The colleges
That's
come to us.
awesome.
We do have, guys just like, hey, we want to intern, we want to volunteer, things like that. So we have those options. If you want to intern with us, shoot me a message. We love,
I
to
can't
develop.
I can't give away an internship. I have not had an intern. I had interns last summer. I
Yeah.
had to fire them both. It's been like super dry.
Yeah.
I'm near a few two colleges, but they're not like exercise science
Right.
schools. But man, I'd love to hear the secrets of finding great interns.
That's one of the things that we, I think, have done a good job of. We really hammer, because we have so many schools in Wisconsin, that we really, try and get in front of, and things like that, with the interns. But then our next level is our assistants. So
Yep.
now our assistants would technically be our next line of directors or leaders,
Hmm.
And so now not only are we going through, reaffirming, the design of the program, but now we start talking about recruiting. How are you recruiting new athletes? How do you retain athletes? What are the sequences of things that we do to retain and to recruit? Business development.
That's
How
amazing.
do you enter a sale in MindBody? How do you set up the schedule? we go through a very thorough process because I had to teach myself all that. And I was like, and I'm still learning. And so, and then our directors, we have another level to that as far as their development goes. I believe in education. For Christmas for my directors, I gave them the West Side bundle. Every one of my trainers on staff got that 9-book
Yeah,
West Side bundle this year, along with some other things. But
that's great.
yeah, so I think constantly searching for teaching and training. We're constantly doing that.
That's amazing that you're also like, so do they get, what's the commission for bringing on new athletes? What, or if you don't want to share any of that, but I've never heard
We
of
have,
place that they usually have like one person doing the sales. You've got coaches building relations, which is awesome.
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a relationship business.
Yes.
And so, it's their job as a director of their gym to build that gym, to sustain it. Um, we have goals as far as retention over the course of the year. How many athletes and clients we want retained over the course of the year. That I'm not very friendly if we fall below that, as you can imagine. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to relationships and doing a good job when you're coaching the kids. You
No
know what I
doubt.
mean? And paying attention to them. And so like our coaches are great as far as like going out, watching games, being in the community. They give a lot more of their time than I ask them because they believe in our systems and they believe in our mission for the kids. And so kudos to my guys and my new lady that I just hired, because they do an outstanding job.
I used to get to a lot more events, but my kids
Yeah,
now it's every weekend I'm at my son and daughter's events. And when you're watching the athletes you train, it's like you feel like they are your kids. When they lose, that hurts too. Going back to like the kids who are training with a sport coach who may not be qualified or educated, what I've been experiencing is those kids, their parents will say, "Hey, he's training with, Coach Smith at the school for this or that sport," and those kids are getting injured. And I
yeah.
think it could be overuse along with poor technique, and it could be, of course, coupled with other things like nutrition, this and that. But it's that non-understanding of how to adjust in season, or like you said, adjusting on the fly, and being able to assess during the warm up, or hey, what did you do yesterday? And so um, we're seeing more injuries with the kids who stop training with us in season, and I think because people like us put out information, a lot of sport coaches sometimes just copy a lot of stuff from Instagram, but they don't have the context behind it. Kind of like that earlier stuff we were just talking about, like, hey, this kid's not as tall and he's going to need more body armor. So I do need to push his strength numbers to protect his body. So, yeah, it's just interesting, like where we're at in this, field where I love it that sport coaches are trying to do it. But that's also going back to what I was saying earlier is like, I'd love for them to say, hey, we need to get help with you, get help from you. Even looking at the Texas scenario, Brian, what was I did that solo episode on that. And I feel it's parents and administrators. Administration needs to get away from we don't have it in our budget, because we're talking about kids. You have kids, and I see how emotional you get when you post about, your kids and taking them to practice. uh I just can't believe when administration comes up with that line of that's not in our budget. When it's done incorrectly, we're seeing kids dying now,
Yes,
through bad conditioning.
yes.
We're seeing it in high school. We've seen it in the college level. It gets now news is very fleeting, but that's a concern for me that if it's done incorrectly, kids are dying, and we still have administration saying we don't have the budget for that. That's
Well, and
crazy.
that's one of the things we talk with our schools about. We'll help you fundraise.
How do you help them fundraise?
Well, I mean, I have, a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame here in a couple months as one of my business partners. But
Right.
I mean, one of the things that we're going to do this excuse me, this spring at some of our schools is I'm going to come to the school on a Saturday, and I'm going to run a speed and agility slash movement slash intro for their middle school kids
Yes.
that are training at the high schools. The schools can charge whatever they want, to have the kids come, and the school gets it all. You know what I mean? I'm going to volunteer, Saturday of my time to do that, to help them basically, because then it comes back into the queue, so to speak, that's helping them pay for our consulting services. And so,
Do they
um,
have to use it to pay for your stuff, or
no,
you just
no,
say
they can use
use
it
it
for
as you
however they want.
wish?
Yeah. But for
Very
me,
cool.
same with some of the schools that we work with where we run the youth program, we still give a percentage back to them, because we're using their facility, but we're also, it's our way of helping them pay for our services, because at
Very
the end of
cool.
the day, I understand that, we're not cheap, but at the end of the day, we're pretty damn good. And so you get what you pay for. And
Agreed.
so, we help with, if you want to do like a 50-50 raffle at the Friday night football game, if you want to raffle off jerseys, we help with that. We have a lot of connections that we work with to try and help these schools do it. So at the end of the day, when you say, like the administrators that say, well, we can't afford it. If it's important to you, you'd find a way.
With anything in
Anything.
life. And
Yeah,
schools, since the beginning of time, have been doing fundraising and things like that. And it's heartbreaking to hear that. And of course, when I knew people would comment and be like, I could do 300 push-ups and I'm 50, but you don't understand the kids today. You cannot do that after a break, after a 3-week Christmas break. You have to think differently. In the 80s, yeah, we would do 300 push-ups. That was that. But today, everything I think about is, will this make them better at their sport? 300 push-ups won't make them better. I'd have, a sport performance program. I said 300 push-ups, you have to get good at if you're preparing for the military and selection, and you probably need to be able to do 1,000 push-ups in a day. But we're not training kids for that. And so that comes down to, I mentioned coaches might copy what they see on your Instagram with no context. Coaches, a couple of years ago, when this whole Navy SEAL thing was the hot thing, they wanted to train football players like Navy SEALs. How many, offensive linemen are 275 at the D3 level, maybe 300 or more,
yeah.
315 or 305 pounds at D1. There's no special forces operators that weigh over 300 pounds. You can't train them the same,
No.
but we're going to get them tough. And this is where you have that lack of understanding of context. It's heartbreaking because you and I are both dads. I don't want my kid ever in a situation in a program that maybe favors somebody who the exercises are just for the lighter people or the faster. You got to be able to say, here's what we're doing, and I'm going to make this tweak for this group, and I'm tweaking it for that group because it's what's safer and better for you guys. That's it. Common sense, I
Take
think.
time. It just it takes time and takes common sense. You're right. I mean, it's got to be a priority. And I always laugh at the coaches that are like, oh, we're doing Alabama's program, we're doing Clemson's program. You don't
Jeez.
have the athletes in your high school that those guys have. Nobody
That's right.
does. I
Yeah.
mean, doesn't. And if you look at Clemson's program from 2022, probably different than what they did in 2018.
Guaranteed.
Why? Because it evolves. Everything evolves.
Guaranteed. And I think a great coach, like you're saying, is evolving.
Has to.
Yeah, you're right. You have to. What I can't remember. Do you guys train adults at your gym a little
We
bit?
do a little bit. Yeah, we have some boot camps and stuff like that. So it's just more general fitness, but we do, at our Verona location, we have boot camps, and, we do ropes and tires and, sledgehammers and just work, and
A
stuff like that.
modified, yeah, modified strength and conditioning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, something that's different and stuff like that.
We were mentioning when we texted before you took a little trip with your family about like location. And so you've had multiple locations. Ironically, you're in a new location. I think you said it's in a baseball like complex.
Yep. So our new location is in Oconomowoc, which is near Milwaukee,
Oh,
which is in
nice.
a semi-private baseball facility that was just recently built. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's interesting because there's a new one in New Jersey that I reached out to, but it sounded like they brought kind of their own people in to do something. And me, I'm not sure if they're like really dialed in, but it's going to be like a tournament destination.
Sure.
You've heard of Great Adventure? So
Yep.
it's near Great Adventure in New Jersey. So
Okay.
like I know Georgia is very big with traveling for baseball, and of course Ripken in Maryland. So this has a bunch of outdoor turf baseball fields, indoor. Do you think, I've been thinking of my own location. Um, it gets really hot in New Jersey in the summers. Are we past the point where if your location has no air conditioning, it's no good? Like, do you have facilities with no, or is everything temperature controlled? Where do you think we are today with what you need in a facility?
Um, to me, it still comes back to, what are you providing for the kids? One of our locations, we have extra fans and we open the doors. Um, when we rotate, and it gets into the 80s in there, but I think, it's always nice to have air conditioning, right? And things like that. But I don't think it's a definite need for your facility. I think the most important couple things that you need when opening a new facility, one is location, right? It's got to be a centralized, in my opinion, it's got to be centralized location near common athletic family interests. So you need to find places where there's motivated families for athletic success, and
How do
that's
you
something that
assess
we have.
that? How
Yeah,
do you you
yeah,
look
it's
at
it's it's really hard. You have to look at the youth programs.
Mhm.
You have to look at the high school programs. I don't necessarily believe, and I've done this now for almost 10 years, that you need to find an area where there's a great football program. I thought that at first, right? Because strength and conditioning, you always associate with football. So many football programs in high school typically have a program built into their high school. And a
Yes.
lot of times the high school coaches are locking their kids down. So you need to find areas where you have, motivated volleyball families and
Yeah.
motivated soccer families and hockey and baseball. You're going to get the football kids um, and things like that. But looking at those youth programs and then looking at, what type of travel programs you have for those high school kids, I think we've done very well with those selections that we've made. Um, and this latest one is it's awesome. It's right off an interstate. It's a great location. It's a new location, and I think those are really some of the important things that I look for. Some people talk about looking at like the demographics, like the median income of the families. I think that's part of it, but I don't think that that's necessarily,
I've
a
changed my mind on that because
end all be all. Yeah,
I'm in a affluent town.
right.
Uh the average house price now might be like 800 grand,
Oh,
and we barely have any kids from this town
yeah,
at all. And
yeah,
I mean, it's like definitely way under 10% of our athletes are from this town. And that's always been that case for 10 years. And and then what's interesting, you mentioned kind of like the athletic success. There's a town that we have a lot of kids come from, and now this year they're on a real like a tremendous like decline, which I never would have imagined. And so sometimes towns have, I don't know, things change,
yeah,
and generations leave, and then there's like a coaching collapse. So inside this baseball complex, what do you think was like the way to get in there? Because I'm sure a lot of people or programs were trying to get in there. Did you have
Right.
a connection? It seems like you're very
I did.
community. Yep.
I did have a good connection with the guys that had built the stadium. We actually were looking at it during COVID. It kind of fell through, and then kind of reemerged, and so, just I think another very important thing is to make sure that, you build great connections with people that are looking to move communities forward. I can't tell you where our next two locations are right now, but they're in two communities that where we have high school presence, and there are parents, there are developers, there are people that are trying to move those communities forward, and they see, the advantage that, we bring to a community as far as the athletes. And
Love it.
so I think, developing a lot of relationships with people that want to move communities forward is very important. And we do that, many different ways. One, I do it through our schools that we work with and the coaches. I do it through my contacts of former athletes that may live in the areas. And I also obviously use, our contacts that I have through Wisconsin, people that either played at Wisconsin or I worked with at Wisconsin. And so those people that you come across in your life, you just never know at some point when you're going to reconnect with them. And they may really, and there's a, one of the, at Oconomowoc, a kid that played for us at Wisconsin, never played a snap. Sorry, he played one snap. He played one
Mhm.
snap in 4 years. He's been one of the biggest drivers in our Oconomowoc location because he's like, I know what it's going to do for the community,
That's awesome.
So it's just those relationships are important. And then finding those, the communities that have really motivated parents. And you'll see it in the youth programs.
Yes.
You'll see, if you see six dads in the dugout, you know that they're ultra motivated because they all,
Yeah.
want the baseball to be good and stuff like that. So that's how I go about it. A little different. It's a little different. Most people look at the dollars and cents in the uh, in the different locations, but I tend to dive into, the motivation of the communities,
Yeah,
and
you're
that
like
worked for us.
it's like you're connected to the pulse. Yeah, the
You have
pulse,
to be.
the heartbeat of the
Yeah,
people, which
yeah.
is really, yeah, that's I like that. I mean, I've thought of it like that, but not as deep as you have. So it's really cool to hear that. Brian, how can you have sportsadvantedge.com if
Yeah.
people want to reach out to you for some consulting? Because we have a lot of coaches that I think they can really benefit from learning a system of training and business from you. I mean, there's probably a lot of stuff
Yeah.
under the umbrella of consulting they could do with you.
Yeah, so we got some new stuff we're coming out with this year, so it's going to be really cool. So I'll keep you up to date on that. But yeah, www.sportsadvantage with the edge.com is our website.
Nice.
Um, you can email me at brian@sportsadvantage.com. I'm good with that. We've instilled a 24-hour rule with all of our trainers. So if you get an email, if you get a text message, you need to respond to it in 24 hours. It's a great habit to put in
Yeah.
with your trainers because a lot of times, you get the great emails, you get the fun emails, but at the same time, you get the angry text message. You got to have hard conversations. I'm trying to teach my guys and my lady that, hey, at the end of the day, you got to respond. And
Right.
so at the end of the day, you'll get a response from me if you email me because I believe in helping whoever we can and go from there. Our Instagram pages obviously are all of our Sports Advantage Instagram
Yeah,
pages.
they could search them, and
Yeah.
you have a different IG for each
Yep.
location,
Yep.
and I think it's like seeing the standard of training is really cool.
Thank you.
Real quick, what's like a hard conversation that somebody might text, like a topic that they're reaching out to a coach about?
Sure. I mean, anything from, hey, my daughter's really not enjoying this. Can I have a refund?
Yeah.
Hey, um, the coach, yelled at my son yesterday. Things that, things that you get into the he said, she said stuff. We do have a baseball organization, Edge Baseball. We have that's the one area where our coaches are not allowed to email any parent on Monday. And our parents are supposed to not email or contact the coach on Monday after a tournament. There's a 24-hour cooling down process that goes on with games, because at the end of the day, my coaches are ultra competitive, and so they're trying to lead their teams, to victories on Sundays and doing the best they can. Sometimes they make bad mistakes, which we all do. But we never address those, or I don't want parents addressing those until 24 hours. Everybody gets a chance to take a step back, think for a minute. And parents, I would encourage you to do this, in any scenario with athletics. Everything isn't going to be sun and roses for your kids.
Yeah.
Your coach is going to discipline your son or daughter. A coach is going to tell your son or daughter that they're probably not giving the effort that they should. That's okay. Take a step back, think about it. If you still want to contact the coach, wait 24 hours, because all when that oven's hot, especially when you get competitive coaches, those conversations turn really, really bad on both ends, and people say things they don't want to say because they feel like they're defending themselves, which they shouldn't. So give yourself 24 hours.
We had a basketball coach say that to us when my daughter was on a middle school basketball team. He said, "Hey, if you want to email me because your daughter didn't play or da da da," he's like, "Wait 24 hours." It was interesting that you say that. That was a couple of years ago. I heard him say that. And yeah, it's coaching sports is really tricky now. Really tricky. So I forgot that. Yeah, that's your thing. You're a baseball guy.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't know if I want to coach sports. Physically, I couldn't coach wrestling again. It would just like destroy my knee. But the thing about wrestling is it's so cut and dry. Hey, this kid is better than the other kid. They wrestled off or they competed in 2 tournaments and he keeps placing more. So it's like he's our guy. Whereas baseball, could be blurry. Basketball could be blurry. Oh, he scored more. Well, the other game we scored more. It's
exactly. And it's like baseball is the ultimate one that's hard, right? Because you have batting average and ERA. Well, you can look at batting average. One kid hits 400, the other kid hit 100. The kid that was 1 for 10, maybe he hit like 9 lasers. Just hit the ball really hard every time. He just hit it right at guys. You could take the guy that's maybe like 5 for 10. He maybe have hit like 6 or 5 blue singles, or bunted, or so. Like I would encourage parents not to look at statistics sometimes and think about it. Same thing from pitching, right? Typically, you're going to throw your best guys against your best teams. Well, typically the best teams can hit good pitching, so you're going to have a lot of different things.
That's right. My son's a pitcher.
trust the trust the evaluations that have been done in the off season. And trust the coaches. Like, coaches don't have it out for your kids. We don't coach to ruin a kid's life or to ruin a kid's experience. We coach, one, because we want to be around and impact, young people, and 2, we coach because we're competitive too, and things like that.
I love it. Man, I was going to say this one thing that I was going to remind. Oh, you also have your own podcast. So for people listening, Get the Edge podcast. Brian does a great job because it's for people, it's for parents and his own members and coaches. It's a very learning oriented podcast. So Get the Edge podcast, just like Sports AdvantEdge. So reach out to Brian, and for everybody listening, we need a lot more 5-star reviews. We're struggling to hit the 500 reviews mark, and that's what helps us spread the word to educate more people. So team, open up the Strong Life podcast on Apple, scroll down and click 5 stars and write a review. Brian, you are the man. I love chat. A text message from you is like, I want to get better. I love it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Zach. And I appreciate the flexibility. Obviously, I had a pretty cool meeting this afternoon, and we were looking at doing this for a couple of weeks, and you were like, you're like, bro, go on vacation. I'll get you when you come back. And
My
so,
schedule is not
yeah,
user friendly for people. People are like reach out and I tell them I try not to miss my kids' competition. So everybody listening, big thanks, Brian. Hang tight a second so we can have a proper goodbye. But everybody drop those 5-star reviews, share with a friend. You can follow Brian. Look on Instagram. Just search Sports AdvantEdge. You'll find multiple Instagrams for each of the locations and sportsadvantedge.com. Connect with Brian for some consulting. All right, team. We'll talk to you soon.